No, the stream is offline. What did you do?
I think we're gonna, yeah.
No, it's online.
Yeah.
They just say, notice the room and then on the program.
Yeah.
It's online now.
It's starting. Starting.
Mention that again.
Oh, you wait. Monero has OBS, or did you download that?
I downloaded it.
Okay.
Why?
I was about to
So
say.
we're
I didn't expect Monero to
gonna
have
start
it.
with our next session. Actually, the long breaks are kind of encouraged at this conference. To be honest with you, that was one of our goals, is to encourage socializing amongst each other, with our speakers, with our guests, amongst each other. So that was actually one of the goals behind the design behind having the break room, and like we kind of on purpose wanted everyone to go over there and just kind of like start talking with each other. So well done, everyone gets an A for that. That was executed well. And so we're gonna start with our next section, which is almost a continuation of what we were just having, a discussion, a conversation, where we get to ask questions. We have a Twitter hashtag. We have our host, Zaid, who is a sophomore, who is going to be our, and so we're going to have Mufti and Isaba, if you can sit here, that's okay. And then we'll go ahead and get started. We may cut lunch a little shorter and may start lunch at about 1:05 or 1:10. So this session will be about 40 minutes. And we'll probably start our afternoon session 5 to 10 minutes later as well. So we'll just kind of bump scoot everything a little bit back. There are sign-up sheets for the office hours on the registration table. Please feel free to sign up to carry some of these individual discussions further in a more one-on-one setting. And that's all I have to say. So again, this is interaction and time for ask questions. So Zaid, please.
All right. So to start off, Imam Mufti, you mentioned about getting that personal connection with the Qur'an. So can you further explain like how we can get that personal connection with the Qur'an, especially as college students who are busy?
Okay. So, alhamdulillah, so inshallah what I'll do is talk just about a few things, and then if you would like me to expound on some certain things more or a related aspect, please let me know. But if anybody has an individual question on what I'll say, I can discuss this in office hours as well. The idea is to basically do something on a regular basis. That's one very important thing. That regular basis can be, you decide. If you can do 10 to 15 minutes daily, that's awesome, that's great. If you can do half an hour a week, that's fine. Okay. Whatever time you can give, you need to do that. Okay. And this really goes back to time management. So it doesn't matter if you're a college student, if you are a family member, doesn't matter where you are in what stage of life. Time management is an essential study skill. And that time management skill should not only be limited to taking the classes and homework and doing the papers and preparing for the midterms and the finals and all that other stuff. You have to you have to accommodate the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in there. Okay. So whatever time you take and dedicate it, you need to make that quality time. So you need to know, for example, what you're doing. I'll give you an example. I prepared a list and I sent it to Brother Ahmoosh. Am I pronouncing his name right?
Yeah.
Ahmoosh, right? Okay. I don't want to mispronounce it.
Yeah, thank you.
To Brother Ahmoosh. So it has, for example, some recommended translations. There are many good ones. I just picked a few of them. He'll inshallah make a copy and I'll explain those a little bit more. So if you have not read the translation of the Qur'an as yet, cover to cover, that would be a good place to start. So that could mean 10 minutes. That's all what you do. Every day, 10 minutes before going to sleep, or in the morning when you wake up, you study that translation for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever. If that's not possible, every Saturday and Sunday. Okay. Let's say even that's not possible. I would say that you should probably take out 2 weeks before exam time, maybe 1 week before midterms. But in the other times when the load in the school is a little reduced, you should be able to spend some time. But for whatever reason, let's say that's not possible. Yes, you have a 25 or a 30-hour job, and you have 18 credit hours, let's say. let's say, you really are that, busy, and that's possible, you have vacation time. Okay? So while you're scheduling your work and family time in there, schedule, let's say, 45 minutes or an hour every day at that time. Make that a goal, that you're going to finish the translation. So translation will be one thing. If you've done the translation, then there are what I would say short tafsirs, short explanations, a single volume. That would be the step number 2, in which there will be basically brief notes, and that's also in that list, a few recommended ones. So there are all these different things which you can do. If you are somebody who, for example, started memorizing the Quran at some point. I know some people started it. Some people have actually memorized the Quran, and you would like to continue that. Well, pursue that passion. That's wonderful. So there are all these different things that you can do. Or you can just recite the Quran in Arabic, a small portion in Arabic, and then read it, read its translation or meaning, depending on what you're committed yourself to. Read that on a daily or a weekly basis. The idea, once again, the key word over here is time management.
Okay, thank you. This is for both of you. Can you kind of reflect on your own religious experiences while in college? Sister, you can start first.
I think college is a time for many of us where we think a lot about finding ourselves, figuring out who we are, understanding who we are, and in the process, maybe getting an education, changing our majors many times. I think most of us come from families where we enter college, we're either going to be doctors or engineers, or pretty much that was it. That was that was what I was told. Pharmacist was the other one, yes. And we enter college with that idea of we're going to follow a very specific path. We're going to leave college and have this great career and typical house with the white picket fence and 2.2 children and live happily ever after. Seldom does it work that way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best of all planners, and I think one of the greatest wake-up calls for me personally was personally experiencing and understanding what tawakkul really is, what it means to have full faith that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best of all planners, but for us as individuals to be responsible, to do everything that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but knowing very well that any test that is sent our way is a blessing. That, the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells us that Amr al-Mu'min gharib, the state of affairs of a believer is strange. If something good befalls him, he says Alhamdulillah. And if something bad befalls him, he still says Alhamdulillah. Because there is nothing bad that comes in our way except that there is good in it for us. You may dislike a thing, but there is great good in it for you. So to bring it back to me personally, I entered college, like many of you probably, with I was accepted into a 7-year medical program, and I started my first day at college. I looked at my schedule, and there was a glitch in it. Instead of a class that I was supposed to have, which was biomedical ethics, I had a class called Intro to Communication. Now this is in the 90s. I looked at this and I'm like, what on earth is communication? And I remember I went to the registrar's office all upset, saying, what is this? Why do I have this class here? And the registrar told me, well, you know what, the other class was full, it's fine, just take this course, it'll count as one of your cores. So I said, okay, and I walked into the classroom, and I remember my professor, she was British, had this great British accent, and that makes everything better. So she started talking, and she was talking about, what it means when someone, raises their left eyebrow a quarter of an inch over their right eyebrow, what this means in a relationship, what this means when you approach someone. And I was fascinated. I was like, people actually study this, At that point, again, my life had been very clear cut. It was, you finish high school, you do this, and that was it. So to enter into this classroom where people actually studied human interaction, I really fell in love, And then I had to explain to my parents why I was dropping out of the medical program to pursue a degree in communication. I don't think they still don't understand what I do. I've got, a sister who's a doctor in pharmacy, another sister who's a biomedical engineer, and another one who just got her PhD in electrical engineering. So I'm still the odd one out in the family. But I think, my field, like entering into the world of communication, was also a big opening for me in understanding Islam and in understanding what it means to not only have relationships with other people, but to love someone for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I think that was the biggest opening for me. it was meant to be that I would go into that class that wasn't supposed to be on my schedule, and that I would start pursuing this field. I grew up young, in high school. I knew Islam, I knew it in the way that many of us, culturally speaking, our upbringing, we spoke Arabic at home. The nearest masjid was about an hour and a half or so away, so we'd go there on Eid. I remember in 6th grade, prior to my parents really coming into the world of Islamic understanding, I was asked to the spring dance by a young man. I still remember his name. But I was asked to the spring dance, and I was so offended that he would ask me because I just kept thinking, doesn't he know I'm Muslim? Doesn't he know that I don't go out on dates? And that was my first step in deciding that I wanted to wear hijab. Not because I understood modesty fully, not even because I understood the hikmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I just knew that I wanted people to know I was Muslim. I just didn't want to find myself in those awkward situations again. And so I did begin wearing hijab, alhamdulillah, but again, without full understanding. And it was a journey, I think, through middle school, through high school, and then finally in college, when I really began to pursue studying Islam. And alhamdulillah, my dream was to study abroad, to go to one of the places a lot of people at that time were traveling to Syria, they were traveling to Morocco to study under the scholars there. And it took a long time, but alhamdulillah, after I got married and I had my first daughter, the opportunity came when I was studying my doctorate to do some research in Egypt, and it was finally facilitated. My husband and I went and we lived for a year in Egypt, and we were able to study under one of the scholars from an Azhar, which was such a blessing to us, but it took time. And I think sometimes when we're in college, we're so enthusiastic and so yay, I want to do this now. And I hear from a lot of college students also, well, they'll say things like, I'm not going to have a relationship with my parents anymore because they're far from the deen, or my parents, they're transgressors because they don't do this and this. And that's something we have to be very careful of when we begin to follow the pursuit of knowledge of the deen, to recognize that first and foremost, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will judge us on our character, our adab, our akhlaq, and carrying that Qur'an as part of our character. And it's important not to ostracize our family, our friends, our community as we head into that path of knowledge. So that was a long answer, I know, to the question, but I think that's just very briefly to look at my experiences.
After doing that, do the tweet thing.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Can you reflect on your own religious experience while you were in college?
Well, I'm amazed you was able to summarize, everything so succinctly. I personally, I was I was very much into science, and I was very nerdy, still am. But my passion was physics. That's what it was. Ever since I was in high school, I did British O-levels and A-levels. And my passion was, to do research in physics. That's what I always wanted to do. And I had read Stephen Hawking's Brief History of Time when I was, I don't remember, in 10th or 11th grade. But before I left high school. That was a book I was fascinated with, and I had also read another book by Steven Weinberg. He's another Nobel laureate that he got in the presidency. And that's what I came. That's what I came to UT Austin for, to study physics. That was my major. And at that time, actually, I had no faith. I was an atheist at that time. Actually, I think a lot of people who are into those circles, they are atheists, and it's if not atheists, they are at least agnostics. It's very hard to be a believer if you are into some of those hard sciences. So I was telling, there were two ladies over here from Indonesia. I was talking to them in the room before we started the program, and I told them that I had an Indonesian roommate. He was doing his master's in petroleum engineering, and he was very religious. He used to pray, and he was very polite. Indonesians are very polite. Malaysians are too, obviously. But they are very polite people, generally. They're very soft-spoken. They're very gentle. I mean, the one word, to describe them is kind. I have not yet met an Indonesian or a Malaysian who's not like that. I'm sure there are people, but I just haven't met them. So I really, liked him as a person. He was somebody, who was just a very wonderful human being, and he was a good Muslim also. One of the things which I remember about him is, he used to make a lot of rice and chicken, and I used to eat a lot of it. And he never said anything with samba, right? I mean, for those of you from Indonesia, Malaysia, you know that, right? Samba, and I still use samba because of those times. So one day I was walking with my friends, and somebody said that, "Do you know what happened to him?" His name was Doni Joko Wijanto. I said, "No, what happened?" They said that he was traveling. He was about to graduate and go back home. He was traveling with a group of friends, and they were in a car accident in Arizona, near Tempe. And they told me that he passed away. He died in that accident. To me, that was a very big shock, because he was, he was somebody I really liked and I really loved as a human being and as a Muslim. I never imagined that that will happen. I think that's the first person who I knew and had a personal relationship who passed away in my life. And I was so touched and so moved by it that I went with some of my other friends to Tempe. I had never been, I was just a student, just a poor student. I never went out of Austin. But this was the first time, they rented a car and everything, and I actually went to Tempe, and I watched his body over there. And his body was sent back to his family. When we were traveling, that's the first time I actually opened the Qur'an. That's the first time. After a long hiatus. I used to read before, but then I had given up. But in these years, this is the first time I opened the Qur'an, and I started reading it. And there were some surahs in there, and I still remember Surah Shams, for example, because this is the first time I actually saw sunrise, an actual sunrise. Of course, I hadn't seen the sunrise before. At night, driving through this desert to Tempe, Arizona. And I decided, I was reading Surah Shams in translation, and I was looking at the sunrise. I said, SubhanAllah, this is just like whatever portion I'm reading. At that time, I felt as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking to me. That's just how I felt. I would say that that's kind of the journey where I regained my faith, I would say. And then one of the first steps which I took is I decided to read the translation of the Qur'an. I'd of course read it in Arabic before several times, but I wanted to read the translation of the Qur'an cover to cover. And Abdullah Yusuf Ali is the one which I happened to read, even though the English was very difficult, very archaic, old type English. And then I started taking notes. I made extensive notes of what I read. And I also had a very good friend who was fairly knowledgeable. He was doing his PhD in petroleum engineering. And he kind of helped me and guided me through the process. And he said, look, it's good you're reading, but you need to write down the things which you don't understand. And I think it's excellent advice he gave me. It's applicable to everyone, I think. What I did is I started writing down the questions which I did not understand, which I had in my mind. For example, if there were two verses that seemed to me saying opposing things, or there was a conflict in them, or that I just did not understand, they didn't make any sense to me. I did not know. So instead of leaving those open ends, what I did is I would make a note of them. And then I read lots and lots of other books, including Jawahir al-Quran by Ghazali, the translation, Jewels of the Quran. Excellent book, if you get a chance to read it. It has some really good stuff in it. And then I remember I compiled those questions which I had. My friend helped me with some. Some were easy, I guess. There were others which he did not know, or he did not give me satisfactory answers. But he said that I know a very famous scholar, Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen, rahmatullah alayh, he will be able to answer. And I remember I wrote down those answers, and my friend had a connection with him. He knew one of his relatives. He sent the questions to him. And he was a very famous scholar, actually a senior scholar, before he passed away. He actually responded to those questions in Arabic. And then my friend translated them for me. So to me, the fact that someone like him, sitting where he was in Oneza, would write back to my questions, it was very interesting. And he was a very knowledgeable scholar. He actually answered my questions in a very honest and very truthful manner. That kind of really put me on that journey. At that time, I asked my parents if they will let me go study Islam. I've changed my heart. I'm not interested in physics anymore. And they said no. You went there with a purpose. You need to finish what you started. you need to finish your PhD in physics. So, anyways, I continued. I started learning Arabic on my own with help from some people, and I learned quite a bit while I was studying physics. Then I went to graduate school. I kept learning. Um, by that point, I had committed myself that I want to learn more, both Arabic and Islamic studies. But I had no way of going or studying anywhere. So alhamdulillah, I want to cut down the story. I got married, I worked in IT, I did different things. And eventually when I had my own money, I went overseas. I went to Mauritania and I went to Egypt and I studied in different places for several years. And I went with my family because by that I had wife and kids. So alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed me to study with some very, very good scholars, both in Mauritania. Sheikh Abdul Wadoud, he used to be the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in his Mahdara in the Saharan Desert. I studied over there with him and some other very well-known scholars. He passed away, and then in Egypt also I studied with different scholars, some very well-known scholars in Cairo, but mostly in Cairo. So this is a blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which he granted. And then I came back and I continued studying and then started working in the masajid. So this is my story of how I became an imam. Somebody was, I don't know, somebody was.
Alright, the next question for Susie Ismail is, how is the Quran a conversation? Like, I understand Allah is talking to me, but why is it not just Allah talking at me?
Oh wow, that just answered my question right
It's a
here.
good question for someone who studies communication, I guess.
Got it.
I still have another one.
When Sayyidina Aisha radiallahu anha was asked to describe the character of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she said his character was the Qur'an. So when we view the Qur'an as something that can become our character, we learn that it goes far beyond the human understanding of what words are. And I think that's why, in my opening statement, I wanted to highlight that verse from Surah Al-Kahf that talks about the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala filling oceans upon oceans. I don't think we should view the Qur'an as conversation, lecture, as words. It's so much deeper than that. The Qur'an is something that lives, that breathes, that we live, that we breathe. It's something that's a part of who we are. When we liken it to a conversation, when we liken it to a lecture, when we liken it just to instruction, we lose what's at its heart. And at the heart of the Qur'an is inspiration. It's something that enters into our hearts, that becomes who we are. So don't look to the Qur'an and say, well, these are words that are telling you what to do. It's a guide, but not a guide like you pick up a travel guide that tells you turn left and turn right. It's a guide that it enters into your life. So it's much more extended than just a conversation or a lecture. It's much more extended than just words or print on paper. When we look at the revelation, the very first word that was revealed to the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam was, of course, Iqra. And when we look at the translation of Iqra, again, it is translated as read, it is translated as recite, but the reality is that this was a revelation that was given to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam who could not read. It was given because it was meant to enter the heart. Iqra bi'ismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Read in the name of your Lord who has created. Because it is not a reading that you and I are used to. It's not like picking up, the latest copy of Twilight or something and reading through it and getting enjoyment only out of it, or getting just an understanding of the situation. It's so much deeper than that. So don't look at the Qur'an as isolated words on a page. Look at it instead as something that can become your character, as something that you act upon, that you live upon, that enters into every part of your life, essentially.
This is for Imam Mufti. What is the absolute best way to deal with my Christian brother who constantly attacks Islam as a false religion?
I don't know of an absolutely best way. There are just a few different things to try. Because you really need to know a little bit more about the person in the sense of what denomination they come from. Because you see, this question has to do with dawah. Right? So when you talk about dawah, there are three things. There is the person who is giving dawah. There is the person to whom the dawah is being given, and then there is the content. Okay. Now, we know very little in this question as to the person to whom you are giving dawah to. Okay? And that's a mistake which a lot of people make, which is not to know who they are addressing. That changes the conversation, that changes the narrative. Maybe he is influenced by what he has seen on the media, for example. If that is the case, there will be a different way to deal with him and to address those issues. It might be that this is something which he perhaps has, been taught in church, perhaps. He might have read some books or he might have read some articles on this topic. There will be a different way to deal with him if that is the case. I think the best thing to do is to have an open heart-to-heart conversation with him. Is to ask him like, okay, you believe it's a false religion. Why do you think so? Explore some of those reasons. Ask him, if he will be willing. Actually, he will not do that. People who generally view Islam as a false religion, they have not been exposed to the beauty of this faith. That's one issue. So anything that you can do to share that with him, and the idea which I was going to suggest is to invite him to a masjid. But he probably will not do that. Somebody who thinks that and says this constantly will probably not do that. Any other thing person can do, to share gifts with him and to share the beauty and the peace and the moderation and the tolerance of Islam with him. So he begins, his hatred or his animosity towards Islam can be reduced. Perhaps even eliminated, but at the very least reduced. I think that would be an achievement. And one way to do that is to show him that kind face, that gentle face, that caring face of who a Muslim is. If there are some specific issues which he has questions about, for example, I'm very involved in talking to many different Jewish and Christian leaders as well as their congregations and stuff. Sometimes there are specific questions. For example, some people, they have questions about what is known as Ayat al-Sayf, the verse of the sword. Okay? They might have read about it. They might be familiar with it. They might have questions about it. So in that case, it's upon, the person needs to that specific doubt. Okay? Or another thing might be where people say that, okay, your prophet was a child. Okay? Because of the child marriage with Aisha Siddiqa. So this is another very common thing which people throw out there. Okay? It's a very common objection. A person should educate themselves about it as to what are the facts and the figures around it and how to address this question if someone has that question. Okay? So you need to know if there are specific questions. Make sure you have the proper knowledge to address that. This is route number 2, right? If there are specific questions. If not, you need to go find that and get him those answers. And then make dua for him. That's one of the best things you can do, is actually make dua for him. If you really care for that person, you should pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to open up his heart. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can change his mind, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can change his heart and his thoughts.
Okay, this is another question for you. How do we explain to the general Muslim population that not having ijazah to interpret Qur'an and Hadith makes them unqualified to interpret, especially in this day and age?
Okay, this goes back to how we understand the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are some concepts which get mixed sometimes, right? When it comes to, for example, some clear verses, right? Qul huwallahu ahad, right? Say Allah, He is one, right? You don't need any ijazah to understand that, either in Arabic, or in Urdu, or in English, or in Pashto, or whatever language you might speak. The meaning of this verse is absolutely clear. Say He is Allah, or say He is God, the one, okay? Ahad can be actually translated in many different ways. There are 9 different interpretations for this word. But the point is that He's the one and the only, the indivisible, the uniquely one, so on and so forth. But the meaning is very, very clear and very simple to understand for almost any person. It does not require a great depth of knowledge in order to understand or interpret or explain this verse. That's one. Okay, now let's come to another verse. Allahu nuru samawati wal ard. Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. All right, okay, now what does that mean? Okay, over there, it's not that simple. There is a little bit more nuance to it. There is a little bit more depth to it. There is a little bit more complexity to it. As to what does that parable of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being the light of the heavens and the earth, what does that parable mean? Because it's given in Surah Nur as a parable. All right. Now over there, I cannot just sit over there and say, well, this is kind of what I feel or what I think. All right. I need to know a little bit more before I go on that route. There is a beautiful, famous statement of Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala. Ibn Abbas is the cousin of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he is considered Tarjumanul Qur'an, or the interpreter of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made dua for him, oh Ya Allah, teach him the fiqh of the deen. Teach him the fiqh of the kitab, the understanding of the deen. The word fiqh in classical Arabic meant understanding, a deep comprehension of the faith. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made dua for him. That's the reason why Ibn Abbas is considered an authority when it comes to interpreting the verses of the Qur'an. He has a very beautiful statement. He said that there are three types of verses in the Qur'an. There is one type of verse which everyone can understand. And again, what he meant in his time is everyone who speaks Arabic, they can understand it. An example would be Qul huwallahu ahad. There are many others. Okay, that's just one. Anybody who knows Arabic, and I will say anybody who reads a correct translation of the Qur'an, they can understand it. Say He's Allah, say He's God, the One. Everybody can understand that. Then there are those verses that only the ulul ilm or the ahlul ilm, the scholars know. Okay, an example of this is what I talked about earlier, the verses which pertain to ahkam. Our scholars have actually written books on the tafsir or the explanation of ayatul ahkam, the rules and in the verses in the Quran that pertain with rules and regulations. Okay, it's a separate subspeciality, so to say. All right, and a person needs to know over there which verses are operative and which have been abrogated, because there is nasikh and mansukh. There are some verses which are operational, which we still apply in our life. Okay, for example, pertaining to idda, pertaining to drinking alcohol and praying, so on and so forth. There are many others, and there are those verses which have been abrogated. We read them, we recite them, but we do not act upon them, because there is a newer ruling after them. Okay, all of this is the domain of understanding and learning ayatul ahkam. This is the job of a faqih. This is the job of a person who devotes and dedicates himself to learning Islam as an academic subject. As an academic subject. Okay, this is what their speciality is. Almost like a combination of a lawyer and a few different things as well. Okay, he's looking at the book as a legal text primarily. Okay, and that's what he's trained in to do. That's what makes him a faqih. Okay, and then there are the third verses that Ibn Abbas said, their meaning is only known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That would be al-huruf al-muqatta'at, the disjointed or the separate letters like alif lam mim. Those letters, which come in the beginning of certain surahs like alif lam mim, alif lam ra, sad, qaf, yasin, so on and so forth. These are letters whose name, and this tafsir comes from Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu ta'ala, and they have a meaning. That's important. They have a meaning. But their meaning is known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because there is nothing in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that has no meaning, that is meaningless. Their meaning is a secret that is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To summarize, you read the Qur'an, okay, and you get your inspiration and your motivation, okay, and you read every verse in the sense that it is addressing you. You need to make sure that you are understanding the verse correctly, so you are not misunderstanding the verse. All right. I will think of a good example of a verse which a person can read and misunderstand. It's not coming to my mind, but I'll give one example, inshallah, later. And then once you have the correct understanding of the verse, simple basic understanding, I'm not talking about any in-depth, complex, complicated understanding, simple understanding of the verse, the next step is what is known as at-tadabbur, okay, which is actually the goal of the Qur'an, which is to reflect on that verse. All right, it is something above the meaning, it is something extra to the meaning. This is extra. This is not just, you're not just, it's different than just going and reading a translation. It's different than just going and reading a book of tafsir. Okay, this is, and actually this goes back to the question which you asked, this is your part of engaging with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, okay, which takes reflection from your side. So in other words, the parable given by some scholars is like this: the Quran is fertile ground, okay, but it takes a skilled farmer to reap and to sow into this ground to take produce out. The example given by Imam al-Ghazali in Jawahir al-Quran is he says that the Qur'an is like an ocean. Okay, it's a magnificent ocean, and it has these beautiful rubies and emeralds, which are hidden into the belly of the ocean. It takes a skilled diver, it's a skilled diver to go deep into the ocean to look for those jewels and to seek them. But those jewels will not come and present themselves to you and to every single person. Okay, but you have to put some effort, like the farmer or like the diver, to go and to seek those jewels or to seek the produce of that land in order to benefit from it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to do so.
Can I ask a question too? The question before you talk about Christian, how do you deal with Christians? Okay. The question you asked before, how do you deal with Christian? Last weekend, my son happened to be place where Imam is living there, and he told me something. It was really fantastic. I've been thinking since then. He organized a group like about more than 700 people, Christian, Jews, and everybody come to the masjid and get dinner and treat them. I mean, it was phenomenal. It was unbelievable what he's done. I was wondering if he could reflect what he did and how it was arranged.
Maybe inshallah, during the time, what I will request from the brother.
I don't know if you have time right now.
So we can have like a few minutes and then I can talk about it at that time, inshallah.
Okay, so probably going to be the final question for Sister Susie Smile. So basically, like in college, you see a lot of different viewpoints from a lot of different people and all that. And we understand about how we have to make Qur'an a personal attachment, we have to give it time and everything. But how do we use the Qur'an to like kind of solidify our beliefs and kind of like actually guide our actions and, just kind of, even though there's so many different viewpoints and you see like in college you're like furthest away from your parents usually. Like when you grow up, you come home to your parents and all of that. But when you're in college, you come home to like either an apartment or like a dorm. Parents are over an hour away, maybe even longer. So how do you kind of, like in a place where you kind of have the least amount of guidance in terms of like parental guidance, how do you ensure that you use the Quran to the best of its ability?
I think that's a great question, and partially the purpose of this conference is to bring that to light. I just want to piggyback off of something that the Imam began with and something that the brother also brought to our attention. It is important to recognize that, again, our engagement with the Qur'an may not always be at the level of a scholar engaging with the Qur'an. That we may open the Qur'an sometimes and read a verse and not be familiar with what it means and not fully understand it. And that's okay. I think that's where we seek the knowledge of those who know. That's where we contact someone like the Imam did who has that knowledge. That's where we seek it out. But that doesn't stop us from taking the Qur'an in conjunction with the Sunnah of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sent to us and to the universe as a mercy to all mankind, not just to Muslims. And he was sent with the gift of the Qur'an. So it's so important that when we live the Qur'an in our lives as college students away from our families, we live it in our actions. And I can't emphasize that enough, because so many times our disconnect or our feeling of not connecting with the Qur'an is because we don't see how it reflects in our actions. We say, I'm a good person, I'm nice to my neighbors, I'm good to my roommate. If I don't read Qur'an every day, is it that big of a deal? Allah is the most merciful. It is a big deal. It is important for us to incorporate that Qur'an. And the reason why I mentioned, the brother's point, he talked about how his son brought together a group of diverse people from different backgrounds, different faiths, and fed them, and you provided a meal and invited them into the masjid. This clearly follows the sunnah of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who his da'wah was living the Qur'an. So we all know, of course, that the narration of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he used to walk in the streets and he'd be pelted by garbage and rocks by his neighbor who was so against the message, so against Islam.
And when that neighbor fell ill once and he didn't see her standing there, he asked about her. He said, "Where is she? She always throws garbage at me and I haven't seen her." And when they told her that she has fallen ill, his response was not, what she got, what she deserved, that she was always terrible to me. He went and he visited her. She wasn't a Muslim. She wasn't someone that believed in La ilaha illallah. But his character was the Qur'an. So he acted upon the injunctions that were given of how we give da'wah. So don't take the Qur'an and say, I have to understand it. If I don't understand it, then I'm just not going to read it anymore. No, but look at the Sunnah of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Study the Seerah. Understand the lives of the companions, those who were closest to the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam as the revelation was revealed to him, and then live that. Carry that in all of your actions. When you interact with people of other faiths, when you talk to your parents, when you are on campus far away from your parents. And just to go back to the parents' point, don't ever lose silat al-rahim, that connection of the womb, the connection to the parents. And I say this over and over again because I see it so frequently on college campuses. So many youth will say, I have found Islam, Allah has put hidayah in my heart, but my parents are still far away, so I'm going to have nothing to do with them, or I'm not going to call them, I'm not going to talk to them. That's not what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us as guidance. So the da'wah begins first and foremost with those nearest you. So make sure that you live that Qur'an with those nearest you, and then extend it outwards. Connect with people outside of the faith. Don't be afraid. There was something on social media that was talking about how you can be either like the carrot or the coffee bean or the egg. And if you take a carrot, which is very hard and strong, and you put it in boiling water, which could represent hardship, the carrot becomes mushy and soft. If you take an egg, which is hard on the outside and very soft and liquidy on the inside, and you put it in that same boiling water, it becomes hardened. It loses its softness. But if you take a coffee bean and you put that coffee bean in the hardship, in the boiling water, it changes the water. It turns it into coffee. And so we see that we as individuals, we as the Muslim Ummah, have been given the gift of being like the coffee bean, of changing those around us through our character, through our adab, our akhlaq. And when we go back to the verse that Imam Mufti had mentioned, Qul huwa Allahu ahad, we look at that surah, that one of the first chapters of the Qur'an that we're taught as children even, and we see that the name of the surah is Surah Al-Ikhlas, even though the verses of the surah don't mention Al-Ikhlas at all. Why is it Surah Al-Ikhlas? Because Al-Ikhlas means sincerity. And Qul huwa Allahu ahad, that tawheed, that belief in La ilaha illallah, should be the backbone, the core of all we do, because that is where our sincerity lies, that our belief in that oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that not taking anything, not even our own desires, as another God, that is sincerity. And if we color all of our actions with ikhlas, which is the surah, which is one of the first chapters that we learn in the Qur'an usually as children, and we carry that in all we do, inshallah, that is how we continue to have a relationship with the Qur'an. That is how we carry it even when we're far away from our family and in a community that may be like that boiling water, trying to either soften us or harden us. We won't let it, because we will be the change, inshallah.
Can I ask one last question? I think, and you can elaborate both of you on this one. I teach Sunday school, and these are the 10th and 11th grade students. And the very first day, usually I ask this question, that why you are here, and it's a very popular answer because my parents, they brought me here. And truly, I think, and I think it's mentioned that you opened the Quran, and it just doesn't hit you. I mean, it's very rare something like you mentioned that you reading that Shamsi wa Duhaha, and that hit you. But it's not something. So what is basically when you open the Quran, and this is the I think a struggle I have with those kids, and probably at the college level, and even with myself. Is if literature or something like this is not of your interest, it's very hard to read. So what basically could be something, even it doesn't feel like you opened it and you read it and then you close it and you are gone for a month or 2 months before you come back to the same book. Maybe then you got inspired by something, you opened it, and then there's something that basically triggered that interest into the book and deen, that it becomes part of your life. Is there some specific thing, I don't know, how you would like to comment on that?
I'll answer briefly
Okay.
so Imam
Yeah,
can have
inshallah.
a vision. Personally, I work with a lot of youth as well, and in the younger ages, we as human beings, we really soak up stories. We want stories. We understand stories. We connect to stories. This is why Hollywood is such a big industry. This is why the book publishers are able to put out these ideas. Our Qur'an, yes, it's inspiration. Yes, it is direction. Yes, it gives us the guide. But it is also filled with stories that can fill our hearts, especially at a young age, with greater understanding. So rather than starting right off the bat with Surah Al-Baqarah and trying to have our young children understand the instructional verses of the Qur'an, start with Surah Maryam. Start with Surah Al-Kahf, the 3 young men who went into the cave. Start with Surah Yusuf. Start with the stories that fill their hearts with understanding and connections, so that they can see that here was a young man whose brothers hated him. This is what he went through. Start with Surah, the story of Sayyidina Yunus and what he went through in the belly of the whale. Start with things that young children can connect with. That's what's so beautiful about the Qur'an, that at whatever age you are, you will open and you will find that balming, that healing, but we have to look for it, like the Imam said. So that's, with children that I teach, and with my own children, alhamdulillah, that's what we've always tried to do. At the young age, you start with the stories. Let them love the Qur'an for, even at that young age, it might seem like entertainment for them, and that's fine. Let them love that part of the Qur'an, and they're going to grow to love the entire Qur'an, its entirety, inshallah.
I would, do we have like 2 minutes maybe?
Yeah.
Okay, so I would like to just add a few things. First of all, I just want to add one comment to the question which you had asked earlier. I think one of the best things the college students can do is bond with one another and develop friendships among one another in order to stay even within the fold of Islam. Okay. And of course, if they can incorporate the study of the Qur'an in like a weekly thing where they come together and do any level of study together, right? Even just read a translation together, right? Or food, pizza, or whatever they can do, that's better than nothing. But anything, the boys and the girls, they can do to kind of come together on a weekly basis for half an hour, whatever they can do, whatever they can afford. Start with even 2-3 people. It's better. It's a good way to bond, because I think that's one of the best things I think which college students can do. As far as how to relate this message to others, help them. Okay, just as Sister Susie has been emphasizing, and help them with what they need, the actual help they need. For example, if they need lab manuals or specimen labs, or if they need notes for the class, this is typical type of stuff. Or if you can be a mentor, right, within your major, right, there are all these options, all these things that you can do, or a tutor, right, for different college students or within the dorm or whatever the case might be, whatever capacity you can contribute and show people, this is what a Muslim looks like. Do it. Don't think about it. Whatever you have to contribute, everybody has something to contribute. Whatever you have to contribute as a Muslim, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed you, please don't think twice about it. Do it. Coming back to the question which you asked, the tradition, I'll tell you the tradition. The tradition is that in younger ages, the focus should be on memorization with rewards. Okay. That has been the tradition, because that's when the mind is most prepared for memorization, as opposed to when we get older. And it has worked for quite a bit of time. And I think it's a good practice which we can maintain. When they kind of come into high school, 9th grade and above, that's where the minds become more inquisitive. Okay, and that's perfectly fine. I teach a class to the students. I've been doing it for several years, and actually those lessons are also online. And interestingly, they're very interested in learning. I make it very relevant, I think, to them. And I've started from cover to cover. On tafsir.io, it has all the things. Where I basically do is I don't go into too much details. I keep it pretty simple. I go through the translation. The translation is at a very simple language. It's not complicated at all. It's something that they can understand. And then I explain some very simple and basic concepts which pertain to their life and the world around them. They seem to be pretty motivated to attend those classes and stuff. Stories are already built in, as the sister said as well. In addition to this, there is a lot of stuff with this, which is within the Qur'an, which is outside of the stories as well, which is extremely useful. That has to be highlighted to the students as well, and that has to do with the correct beliefs. And those beliefs sometimes have to be emphasized. For example, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because a lot of kids have questions, like Sister Susie said, that this student asked, why can't I just commit a sin and then I'll repent later, right? The reason why this question comes from also is partially because there is so much emphasis all the time in some circles that Allah is Ghafurur Rahim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ghafurur Rahim, no question. But if you open the Qur'an, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wherever He talks about His maghfirah and His rahmah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also talks about His punishment. If you just open it, right? If you don't open it, it's very easy to say, okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive everything. But if you actually open the Qur'an, if there is mention of Jannah, there is also mention of Nar. Okay? So that balance has to be created when we are talking to the students, inshallah.
So if anyone else has any questions, then there's office hours. I highly recommend that you go into it.
Yeah, so don't care for this discussion. If you look at your program, there is there's another discussion slot, and what will happen then, I know there's a lot of leftover questions. They're gonna get answered, inshallah, hopefully that's the goal.
Eventually.
If you have leftover questions, that's why there's an extra slot for a discussion, just like this, at 4:45. And it will actually be a breakout session. There will be 2 parallel sessions going on at the same time. We are gonna break for lunch now, and we are gonna push all of the slots back 15 minutes. So we're going to get back from lunch, inshallah, at 2:45 as opposed to 2:30 to give everyone an hour and 25 minutes. An hour and 25 minutes. Thanks again, everyone. And prayer is going to be held here in the room. There's a room that we'll have set up for prayer. That will be held. We had it at 2. We'll move it at 2:15. And that'll stay open if you come in late or come in early and want to pray. That room will stay open. It's at the end of the hall, but we'll put a sign out there too to direct you guys. Any other questions on places to eat? Ask.
How do we sign up for office hours?
And thank you. Office hours. There's a sign-up sheet for office hours right outside on the registration table, and the time slots will be bumped back 15 minutes, if that makes sense. So as opposed to starting at 2:30, we'll start at 2:45. Yeah. Right. Yeah, we can cross over. Yeah, okay. So for lunch, thanks everyone for coming. See you after.